Episode 2. Whispers of Wartha, Nevada desert exhaled its fury as the sandstorm's roar softened to a restless murmur, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the wind. Inside Jacob Kane's weathered ranch, the air crackled with tension. The firelight casting jagged shadows across rough-hewn walls, Jacob stood by the window, his rifle a familiar weight in his calloused hands, his silver-streaked hair catching the glow of the flames. His face, etched with lines of loss and solitude, was taut as he scanned the moonlit dunes beyond the shutters. The scout he'd spotted earlier had melted into the night, the hoofprints scarring the sand and that lone gunshot echoing from the distance told him danger was closing in. Elias Ward's men were near, and something else, something unknown, lurked in the desert shadows, its presence as ominous as the storm itself. Nita, the Navajo leader, moved to his side with the grace of a predator, her dagger glinting like a vow of retribution. Blood still crusted on her brow from a cut sustained in their desperate flight, but her dark eyes burned with a fire that matched the hearth. "That shot wasn't Ward's," she said, her voice low, carrying the weight of someone who'd survived. "Too many ambushes. His men don't waste bullets on warnings. Whoever fired it wants us to know they're here." Jacob's jaw clenched. 10 years of living as a recluse had sharpened his instincts to a razor's edge, and they screamed that this night would end in blood. He glanced at the 12 Navajo women scattered across the cramped room. The young girl, barely 16, rocked. Her newborn, its cries now hushed, but still a fragile threat in the quiet. Her name, Jacob learned, was Awi, and her baby's faint breath seemed to tether her to hope. The oldest woman, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen empires fall, was called Shima, her hands steady as she notched an arrow in a small bow hidden beneath her cloak. These women weren't refugees fleeing slaughter, they were warriors, and their presence had transformed Jacob's solitary haven into a battleground. "Who else is out there?" Jacob asked, turning to Nita, his voice rough as the desert stone. "You said Ward's hunting you? Who else wants you dead?" Nita's expression flickered, a shadow of something unspoken passing over her face like a cloud across the moon. "Not dead," she corrected, her voice steady, but laced with a quiet fury. Silenced. "Ward's not the only one who wants our secret buried. There are men, powerful men who'd burn this desert to keep it hidden." Jacob felt a chill, not from the cold seeping through the wooden shutters, but from the weight of her words. He'd spent years avoiding the world's troubles, but now they'd found him, knocking on his door in the dead of night. "What's this secret worth dying for?" He pressed, his green eyes narrowing, searching hers for answers. Nita stepped closer, so close, he could smell the desert dust on her clothes and the faint metallic temps of blood. Her voice dropped to a whisper as if the walls themselves might betray them. "A map, drawn by my father before Ward's men killed him. It shows a gold vein running through our land they want to claim. But it also marks something else. Something Ward fears more than gold." "More than gold?" Jacob's brow furrowed, his voice skeptical. In the West, gold was a deity men worshipped with bullets and betrayal. What could be worth more? Nita's eyes held his, unflinching as if daring him to look away. Proof of what Ward did to our people. Massacres burned villages, women, and children slaughtered, all to clear the way for his masters. The map leads to a ledger, hidden in a canyon, listing every crime, every name. Jacob's grip on the rifle tightened, the wood creaking under his fingers. He'd heard whispers of Ward's brutality in saloons and trading posts. Tales of a man who wore a captain's title but acted like a butcher. But a ledger implicating powerful men? It was a death sentence for anyone who touched it. A fuse. That could ignite a war. "Do you think you can get to it before he gets to you?" he asked, his voice low, testing her resolve. Nita's lips curved, not into a smile but a challenge, her eyes gleaming with a fire that both unsettled and drew him in. "We don't have a choice. If we don't, our people's blood will mean nothing." The weight of her words settled over Jacob like a lead blanket. He'd spent a decade running from his own pain, from the guilt of failing Clara and Lily. Now, These women were asking him to step back into the fire, to fight for because that wasn't his. But as he looked at Nita, her defiance a mirror to the man he used to be, he felt something stir, spark of purpose he thought had died in the desert 10 years ago. Before he could respond, a sharp clatter broke the silence, like a rock striking. The wooden fence, outside. Jacob spun toward the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. The scout was back, closer now, a dark silhouette crouching near the corral where Jacob's horses snorted nervously. But something else caught his eye, a second figure, barely visible in the distance, moving with a different rhythm as if watching. The scout. Two forces converging on the ranch, unaware of each other's presence. They're not together, Jacob muttered, his mind racing to piece together the puzzle. Ward's scout and whoever fired that shot, they're not on the same side. Nita's eyes widened, a rare crack in her stoic facade. Then we're caught between two enemies, she said, her voice tight with realization. Jacob's thoughts churned like the sand outside. One enemy was bad enough, but two. He glanced at the women, their faces set with grim resolve. Awa clutched her baby tighter, her young eyes wide but unyielding. Shima adjusted her bow, her movements precise, as if she'd faced death 100 times before. We need to take out the scout before he signals Ward, Jacob said. Quietly. Nita nodded, her gaze sharp as she signaled to women lean, silent figures with daggers tucked into their belts. Tala Kiona go with him, she said, her voice carrying the authority of a general. The rest, hold the house. Jacob hesitated, unaccustomed to taking orders after years of answering only to himself. But Nita's command was undeniable, her presence a force that filled the room. He nodded, slipping out the back door into the biting desert air, Tala and Kiona shadowing him like specters. The sandstorm had faded to a light swirl, masking their steps as they crept toward the corral. The scout knelt by the fence inspecting tracks, his rifle propped against a post. Jacob raised his own rifle, aiming for a clean shot, but Talas' hand stopped him, her grip firm. Alive? She whispered, her Navajo accent thick but clear. He might know something. Jacob cursed under his breath, the old bounty hunter in him bristling at the delay, but he lowered the rifle. Tala and Kiona moved with lethal grace, circling the scout like wolves closing in on prey. Kiona's dagger pressed against his throat, a bead of blood welling under the blade, while Tala pinned his arms with a strength that belied her slight frame. The scout, a wiry man with a scarred face and eyes like a cornered coyote, froze, his rifle clattering to the sand. Who sent you? Jacob growled, stepping into the moonlight, his shadow looming over the man. The scout smirked, though his eyes darted nervously. Ward don't like loose ends, Kane. Your harbor in his prey. He'll burn this place to ash. Jacob's blood ran cold. Ward knew his name. This wasn't a random hunt. His past was clawing its way back, dragging him into a fight he'd tried to escape, and the gunshot. He pressed, leaning closer, his voice a low snarl. Who else is out there? The scout's smirk faltered, a flicker of fear crossing his scarred face. You don't want to know. They ain't Ward's men. They're worse men who don't leave witnesses. Jacob's heart thudded, the scout's words sinking like stones. Before he could demand more, a scream tore through the night, high and piercing, coming from the ranch. His head snapped up, dread flooding his veins. Firelight flared through the windows, brighter than before, and smoke curled upward, the crackle of flames drowning out the desert's whispers. The house was burning. Nita, Jacob shouted, sprinting back toward the ranch. Tala and Kiona dragging the scout behind, his wrists bound with a leather strap. As they reached the porch, the front door burst open, Nita staggering out, coughing, her dress singed at the hem. Blood streaked her arm, not from the earlier cut, but a fresh wound, and her dagger glistened red in the firelight. Behind her, the other women emerged, coughing and stumbling, Awi clutching her baby, its cries swallowed by the roar of the flames. Ambush. Nita gasped, her voice hoarse as she steadied herself against the doorframe. Someone threw a torch through the window. Not Ward's men, someone else. Jacob's eyes darted to the desert, where shadows moved in the distance too many. Too fast, their outlines jagged against the moonlit dunes. The scout's words echoed in his mind. They're worse. His ranch, the last remnant of his old life, was now a trap caught between Ward's army and an unknown enemy. He grabbed Nita's, arms steadying her as she swayed, their eyes locking in a fleeting moment that felt heavier than the chaos around them. Her breath was ragged, but her gaze held a fire that refused to break. "We fight," she said, her voice cutting through the crackle of flames as unyielding as the desert itself. Jacob nodded, the heat of the fire searing his back, the weight of his rifle grounding him. 10 years ago, he'd lost everything by trusting the wrong people, by believing in peace when war was all the world offered. Tonight, he'd fight to protect these women, to protect Nita, and maybe, just maybe too, reclaim the man he'd buried under the sand. But as the flames roared higher and the shadows in the desert drew closer, he knew this was only the beginning of a war that would test them all. The fire spread, licking up the walls of the ranch, its glow casting an eerie light across the desert. Jacob pulled Nita back from the porch, his hand lingering on her arm longer than necessary. A silent acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. The other women formed a defensive line, their weapons drawn, faces set with a resolve that spoke of battles fought long before this night. Shima the elder stood at the center, her bow raised, her eyes scanning the darkness like a hawk. Aoi, huddled behind, her baby now silent. As if sensing the gravity of the moment, Jacob dragged the scout forward, shoving him to his knees in the sand. "Talk," he growled. "Who's out there? What do they want?" The scout spat, his defiance crumbling under the weight of Kiona's blade. "I told you, Kane. Ward wants the Navajo women dead, especially the one with the map. But the others, they're not his. They're hired men, sent by someone higher up. They don't care about gold. They want the ledger." Jacob's mind raced. A ledger detailing Ward's crimes, implicating men powerful enough to hire their own killers. This was bigger than a land grab. He glanced at Nita, who stood rigid, her dagger still dripping blood. "Who are these men?" he asked her. "Who's Ward answering to?" Nita's jaw tightened, her eyes flickering with a mix of anger and fear. "My father knew," she said. "He was a surveyor for the railroad before they took our land. He met men in suits, men who spoke of progress, but reeked of greed. Paid Ward to clear our villages, to make way for their mines and railroads. The ledger names them senators, tycoons, men who think they're untouchable." Jacob's stomach churned. He'd seen men like that in his bounty hunting days, men who hid behind wealth and power while others did their killing. But to hunt women and children for a ledger, that was a darkness even he hadn't faced. "Where's this ledger now?" he asked. "Hidden," Nita said, her voice firm. "In a canyon 3 days' ride from here. The map shows the way, but Ward's men burned our village to find it. They didn't know my sister kept it, sister." Jacob's eyes darted to Aoi, then back to Nita, the girl with the baby. Nita shook her head, her expression darkening. "Not Aoi, Lila. She's out there somewhere hiding with the map. Ward thinks she's dead, but she's smarter than he knows." Jacob's heart sank. Another piece of the puzzle, another life at stake. "Then why come here?" he asked. "Why my ranch?" Nita's gaze softened, just for a moment, as if seeing through him to the man he'd once been. "'Cause the desert speaks of Jacob Kane," she said. "A man who once stood against killers, who saved a Navajo warrior named Sela years ago. My father knew him. He said if we ever needed refuge, we should find you." The name Sela hit Jacob like a bullet. Zella had been a friend, a Navajo scout who'd pulled him from a canyon ambush during his bounty hunting days. They'd shared whiskey and stories under the stars, but Jacob hadn't seen him since Clara's death. The memory stung, a reminder of the man he'd abandoned to grief. "Sella's dead," he said flatly, "and I'm not that man anymore." Nita stepped closer, her voice soft but piercing. "You're still here, Kane. That's enough for now." Her words stirred something. In him, a flicker of the fire he'd thought extinguished. But before he could respond, another scream cut through the night. This time from Tala, who stood guard near the corral. "Riders!" In the distance, under the pale moonlight, a line of riders emerged, 10, maybe 12, their silhouettes jagged against the sand. But they weren't charging. They moved slowly, deliberately, as if sizing up the burning ranch. And behind them, another group smaller, stealthier, slipped through the shadows. Their movements out of sync with the first. Two groups, Jacob muttered, his heart pounding. Ward's men and whoever else. Nita gripped her dagger, her eyes narrowing. We can't fight both. Not here. Jacob's mind raced, calculating their odds. The ranch was indefensible now, its walls consumed by flames. The corral was empty, the horses scattered in the chaos. They had weapons, his rifles, the women's daggers, and bows, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. At the scout, still kneeling, his smirk gone. You know a way out? Jacob demanded. The scout hesitated, then nodded. There's a gulch, half a mile west. Narrow, easy to defend. Ward don't know it. Jacob didn't trust him, but they had no choice. Move, he ordered, hauling the scout to his feet. Nita, get the women ready. We're leaving. Nita rallied the group, her voice cutting through the panic. Stay close. Stay low. We're not dying tonight. As they slipped into the desert, the fire's roar fading behind them, Jacob felt Nita's presence beside him, her shoulder brushing his in the dark. It was a fleeting touch, but it sent a jolt through him, a reminder of something he hadn't felt in years' connection. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the gulch ahead. But her words echoed, You're still here, Kane. That's enough for now. The gulch loomed. Ah! A dark slash in the desert, its walls steep and shadowed. Jacob led the way, the scout stumbling. Ahead under Kiona's watchful blade. But as they reached the entrance, a new sound froze them a low, rhythmic thud, like a war drum. Hoofbeats not from Ward's men, but from the second group, closing in fast. They found us, Nita whispered, her voice steady but urgent. Jacob turned, rifle raised, as the first rider crested the dune. Not Ward's men, these war-dark cloaks, their faces hidden, their movements too precise, too professional. Mercenaries, hired killers, just as the scout had warned. Jacob fired, the shot echoing, dropping the lead rider. The others scattered. But the thud of hooves grew louder. Ward's men now charging from the opposite direction. Caught between two fires, Jacob looked at Nita. Her face lit by moonlight, her dagger ready. We hold the gulch, he said. It's our only shot. She nodded, a spark of trust in her eyes. As the women took positions, arrows and daggers gleaming. Jacob felt the weight of their lives and his own past settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about survival, it was about redemption. Episode to end, caught in the crossfire. Episode 2 traps Jacob and Nita between Ward's army and a mysterious new enemy. With the ranch in flames and a secret ledger threatening to ignite. A war. Who are these cloaked riders? Where is Lila, and can she protect the map? Will Jacob and Nita survive the gulch? Tune in for episode 3 to see if they can outwit their enemies and uncover the truth. If you're hooked on this saga, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to catch every heart-pounding moment. Share your theories about the mysterious mercenaries in the comments below.